Hello and welcome to the Octopus Electric Vehicles live YouTube on the new Tesla updates. We're just working out a couple of technical things with my secret squirrel Ollie in the background, just to make sure that you can only see one of our screens and not two. But if you can see one, fantastic, we'll get all that sorted. Ollie is also going to be on YouTube, making sure that any questions that come up, we're going to try and get answered for you. He's going to message me through this system here. So if I'm looking down, it's not that I'm not realizing what's going on. I'm having just double checking and seeing whether or not we've got any questions come in. Now, what we'll do is we'll wait a couple of minutes, wait for people to get nice and settled and get in. But also, we can have a little chat about Octopus, about what's going on, and about why we're running this webinar or this YouTube Live. Now, we're running it because actually Tesla this time last week came out with a rather large update, one that we've been expecting for a long time now. We've seen prototypes being tested at the Nürburgring. We've seen prototypes tested in Southern California. And we know that they've been thinking about doing a bit of a refresh for a while, because if anybody recently has driven a Model 3 or an older Model S, they'll know that the Model 3 has so much to offer in being a really compelling car that really competes now with the Model S and Model X. If you're looking for a little bit more space, nothing beats either of those two cars. And if you want even more space, that Model X is fantastic for that. What we're going to do today is we're going to run through the changes that have been made. There's been some exterior changes. There's been some chat about long range and Plaid, and we're going to go in and discuss a little bit about the technology that makes Plaid Plus available. Tesla have stayed very tight-lipped about it. However, they did announce at World Battery Day how they were going to make Plaid Plus possible. All we've done is brought those two announcements together and bringing them into a place where you can understand them a little bit more. My name's Charlie. I am Octopus Electric Vehicles EV Communities Champion. It's a long title, I know, but I have a history in working at Tesla and at Caterham, and I have run businesses that deal with teaching people how to drive cars a little bit faster. What that should allow us to do is delve into that technology, dig a little deeper under the surface and understand what's going on there. Now, I know we're about 3 minutes in, so before we get kicked off, just want to let you know about who Octopus are. Octopus Electric Vehicles is a sister company to Octopus Energy. And what we do is we get you the complete solution when it comes to your EV. We get you a car, a charger, and renewable energy tariff all under one roof. And we want to run events like this, granted that they're virtual at the moment, to keep you all up to speed with what's happening in the electric vehicle world. There's some plans for another one of these in the coming days, because right now I have a Fiat 500e sat on my driveway, and we'd love to let people know more about that too. Really, my role is to make sure that people are choosing the right car for them. If they're choosing a car that doesn't suit their needs, in 2 or 3 months' time, they'll be telling everybody how terrible it is. If they pick a car that suits their needs and they fall in love with, we then help that transition to electric vehicles become faster and easier. And that's really what we're here to do. Some people, the Model 3 will be perfect for. Some people, the Model S will be perfect for. Some people, the Model X will be perfect for. And some people, that Fiat 500e will also be perfect for. And actually, them spending more money on something else doesn't make sense, and vice versa. Not spending enough money on the right car doesn't make sense either. Now, shall we get on to Tesla? If you do have any questions, pop them in the chat panel, whatever you've got, whether you're on your phone or your laptop or you're on a tablet, you can absolutely get in there. As I said, Ollie, our secret squirrel, will be helping us by sending me those messages through to my phone. There's nothing that's come through just now, but they'll all come through here, and he'll be able to help us get that sorted. So let's get kicked off. Let's see what's going on. What has been announced in 2021 by Tesla? Well, they've started with the obvious, the outside of the car. There's some new revised front and rear bumpers and also some changes to some wheels, which we'll show you in a couple of seconds. We've been expecting a bit of a facelift for a wee while, but not something quite as subtle as this. I personally was thinking they'd go a little bit further, but actually looking at it, it seems really quite cool. They've got rid of all of the chrome on the car except for that little Tesla badge, but everything else on the car is now a satin black to match the new Model 3 and what has always been on the Model Y. I think moving to satin black shows a move away a little bit from that American luxury car and much more towards this as a practical, really well-built car as well. We've seen two new wheel designs on the Model S and on the Model X, but we're just going to cover one of them on the Model S today because essentially they do the same thing. What they try to do is to increase the aerodynamic advantage of a wheel. Now, back in 2008, if you've ever followed Formula One, in 2008, you may remember that they put covers on the wheels because wheels are some of the most aero-inefficient devices we can have. They take air, they spin them all up, they spin up that air and create huge pockets of dirty air, as we like to call it, in the industry. And that then makes it harder for other bits of the car to either push through or follow a car in front. Now that's when it's in racing, and part of those wheel cowlings and coverings were to try and force the air back behind to lower that slipstream advantage to the car behind. But if we lower the slipstream advantage to the car behind, what we're actually doing is creating less drag because air can get back into it as fast as possible. Now, what we can see is those wheels have been squared off a little bit. You can see they've got a flatter surface to them, meaning that less air can be drawn in so easily. The updated wheels on the standard range, or the long range and the performance, the long range, the standard wheels are the same as the Model 3. Not in the way that they look, but they are an alloy wheel with a plastic cover, again, just to stop that air being drawn into the wheel. With a performance car, you need to think a little bit about drawing that air into that wheel because what you're trying to do is also cool the brakes. Now, if you have a car that's fantastic at regenning, you shouldn't really need to be cooling the brakes. However, if you've seen any of Misha Chowdhury's videos of taking the Model 3 around the Nürburgring, he absolutely adores it, but it does start to overheat its brakes about 2/3 of the lap in. We know that Tesla now really think that lap time is something that they should be chasing. Couple other little bits there. You can see that that new front chin is a little bit more aggressive and you've got a bigger, wider opening at the front. Also, they've replaced the fog lights at the front there as well. And for those eagle-eyed amongst you, they've basically turned the Model 3 lights upside down and inserted them in with a bit of a smoky finish. This is very reminiscent of what a lot of British manufacturers who make amazing cars, but don't really need to worry about lights do as well. Finally, on the rear there, you can see a more pronounced diffuser, which on most cars wouldn't be such a key feature. However, because the entire floor of a Model S is essentially flat, the way that that air exits the rear of the car is super important. If you've already got a Model S or a Model 3 or a Model X, I encourage you when it's next warm enough and not wet on the ground to lie down and just have a look at the underneath. One of the things that I was always so impressed with was the little two inlets just at the motor to allow cool air in. Now that was back in 2015. Whether or not it's still there, I don't know. But when I was driving for Tesla, it was something that I loved, the idea that I basically had a Formula One floor on a standard road car. Now we'll move on to Model X. Now Model X differences are a little bit less. They haven't had the same fascia upgrade apart from those little fog lights. But what they have done is gone to a secondary wheel and to a bigger second wheel as well. Now, before you start asking, yes, this one does not have that plastic cowling over it. And that's super important to point out, because if you're actually going to be using your Model X for climbing over rocks or jumping through a muddy field or anything like that, this might not be the right thing for you to have that plastic cowling. These wheels will let rain and water and mud through, meaning you can get a little bit more of a drive there. They've done the same thing on the rear. They've built a little bit more of a pronounced rear diffuser. However, it's not quite as important because this car is a bit more chunky and therefore does ferry more air out of its way. Finally, those new wheel upgrades. Now, right there, you can see a huge difference. You can see that flat rim that we're talking about and them trying to create that flat fascia all the way around the car. And I think that that's really, really important for you to think about moving on. These little upgrades that Tesla have been making have been constantly evolving to make something that's just a little bit more slippery in that air, and actually should account for a little bit more range in the long run. Your drag increases exponentially as you speed up, to the point that once you're above about 60 miles an hour, to go 10% faster, you need 30% more power. Now, to have 30% more power, you need to be pushing an awful lot more air out of your way. If you think about sticking your hand out of the window at speed, you'll notice how it gets pulled back quite instantly. Whereas if you're just driving along at 20 miles an hour, it's quite easy to let your hand sit out the window and roll in the air. This is because as we increase speed, the pressure on that car becomes more because we're hitting more molecules of air as we're driving through. This is why Tesla are looking at these upgrades. So we're probably now going to move on to the big one, or the most noticeable one for the Teslas, and that is the interior. Now, we see a whole new interior. We're going to speak about the steering wheel, so let's move on from that before we get chatting. But this is the interior of the Model S. Now, I have got it up on my big screen, so if you see me looking over here, I will try and move over there to have a look at it and talk you through. Now you can see that they've updated it entirely. They've moved that screen to being landscape instead of portrait. And of course, across the top there, you can see that wood that they've started to bleed in. It's looking very similar to the Chinese updates that they made to Model 3, where they're bringing that wood back onto the doors. Something else you'll notice is different fabric below that white leather, that pleather, that white vegan leather they have. You'll see there's a slightly different fabric there as well, which hasn't been picked up by many. You'll see the tray, or what we used to term, if there are any really older Tesla owners, and I mean older as in terms of early Tesla owners, you'll notice that the canoe is kind of back. The canoe was the big bit you used to have where your center console used to be. Now, there is a center console underneath there. Don't worry about that. But that idea of it being flat, not looking like it was the center console, is back. You've got two wireless chargers that can sit there as well. And you have some other bits and bobs that go on, which we've listed so you can have a look at. The things I really want to draw your eye to as we go along is that change of that armrest in the middle there, and also that wood as we go around. That front display has been made slightly smaller, and then also up the front there, you can see the speaker system has changed as well. Now we'll move on and list everything so you can go through and see, and we'll have a chat through what we mean. So an all new design, I mean, we can see that that's nice and easy. We have a premium 22 960 watt speaker sound system with active noise cancelling. Now, I don't think much of those numbers is that important. I think the fact that there are 22 speakers is kind of quite cool, and I think that a high watt system is fairly good. But the idea of it being noise cancelling is super, super exciting. I think that gives a whole new level of what it could be when you step in. You'll also notice that the image that we're using on this slide is the Model X. So you'll see those doors are a little bit chunkier, a little bit deeper, and the door pockets are a little bit bigger. Down near that passenger or that driver footwell, you can see. It has a new multi-device music and media over Bluetooth. And I think that's something that Tesla owners have been crying out for a long time. You'll be able, or you should be able, to have one person phone you at the same time as somebody else's Bluetooth is playing through the speaker system. And I think that is hugely, hugely important. We have a new center display that moves, so it pivots. And also it's 17-inch side to side. So it's a little bit smaller than the Model S and Model X is already. But remember, because it's turning, it's probably more able to be used as well. There's also another screen behind that armrest that you can see for the passengers in the rear. You're able to connect Bluetooth or wireless controllers to that as well, and you'll be able to play games while you're driving along, or while somebody else is driving you and you're sat in the back. You can also do the same on that big screen when you're parked up and you are charging. And there's a new gaming computer that makes it just about as powerful as a PS5. What I don't expect to see is something like Gran Turismo or iRacing coming to your Tesla, because I think that would get really confusing. If you were driving your car to a charging station and then you were playing a racing game, think a proper sim racing game, that could feel very odd. But we can see there that they are launching with things like Witcher and other stuff in there as well. We see that the ventilated front seats are back. We've seen them before and then they got rid of them. So I wouldn't hold out hope that they will definitely be here. Now, this is going to be a running theme through everything we speak about today. Some of the things that we're going to speak about, I don't think we'll see, or I don't know if we'll see. And those front ventilated seats are one of those. Because in the US and California, where it gets really hot, they make so much sense. But in Europe, they struggled with getting that really high quality vegan leather and getting those perforated seats perfectly right. So we'll see how that comes along. Don't hold out hope, but also don't take it as I'm saying they're definitely not coming. I'm just saying we know they've struggled with them in the past. Again, coming back to those two wireless chargers there in the middle underneath that big screen that allows you to access and charge your devices as you're going along. I am a little bit concerned that in a Plaid model, those phones are going to end up in the bag. So just be very aware of that, and we'll see how we can get on. We also know that there's going to be USB-C as they've moved to on Model 3 spread right across the cabin. And that should be a lovely, lovely impact as well. We know that they've changed a lot of the buttons as well. So the interior of the car is changing to having buttons that don't move. A little bit like if you're on a Mac, your mouse pad doesn't actually move anymore. It just reacts to the force that you're pushing at it, and it pings your finger back, pretending to be a clicky button. They're going to do this on the doors and also some of the things on the steering wheel, and then that long bar along the bottom of that wireless charger as well there, where you can see that little hazard sign in there. There will be a bit more of a clicky button, but it won't actually click. It'll be more haptic feedback if we're going to use Porsche, or force touch if we're going to use Apple. Now that carries over onto one of the most important updates to the car, and that's the steering yoke. And that's what Tesla are calling their fantastic new weird steering wheel. Now, for me, it's really important to point out that the Roadster had a steering wheel that looked like this. The Cybertruck had a wheel that looked like this. However, Tesla are saying that it's the ultimate focus on driving, no stocks, no shifting. So they've got rid of down the outside the stalks that move up and down. So you're no longer going to be indicating with your fingers, rather you'll be pressing a button on the screen. You won't be moving into gear either. You will not be pulling up or down on that gear to go into drive or into reverse, but they're talking about the idea of it being AI, or you'll be able to select it down the bottom there, which I'll show you in another photo to be able to get sorted. With a stockless steering yoke, you can enjoy both the best car to drive and the best car to be driven in. Now, I'm going to put something out there which has made the rounds first things first, we don't know if this will come to the UK. Some Tesla fans have already found a normal steering wheel in the Tesla website. Now, why do I say that? That's because in European racing and in all British racing and in European driving, you're not able to have a rimless steering wheel, because in certain situations, especially in the cold and in Scandinavia, you need to be able to grab a steering wheel as it's turning. Some notable cars have tried things in the past that then got turned down. One of them in quite a big way was the Citroen C4. If anybody has ever driven one of those, they know that the interior part of the steering wheel, the middle part of the steering wheel, stays still as you turn round, which can get really confusing, because if you're looking at the steering wheel, you don't know where you're turning, and you could be fully on the left, but actually you're turning right, which could get a little bit concerning for you. I don't know. This is one of those things that I'm saying, I don't know whether it will or it won't, but Tesla haven't said anything about it, but I do expect something to be a little bit strange there. Now, the drive modes, like we've said, the reverse, the neutral, the drive, and the park, are all apparently selected with the car doing that for you. I imagine that will be connected to your seat and to the key. So as you get out the car, it will automatically apply the park brake and things like that, which some, in fact, all of them already do, but it will be much more intuitive in that sense. The other thing that we do understand is that that bar where that hazard lights are, you should be able to select your drive in there as well, but hold on to your hats. We're not too sure if that's actual fact just yet, but that is what we know, we think will be happening. Now, there's a few questions that come along with this when we're looking at this car in particular, and I'm just going to double check and see if there's any questions on these things around stuff. So I can see some stuff around, is the steering wheel, oh, that's Siri talking to me. Is the steering wheel legal in the UK? Well, I think we've covered that off. We're not 100% sure just yet, but we will keep you up to date and make you aware as soon as we know. There's some stuff around a newer European, a smaller car, which absolutely we'll chat a little bit about, but we need to chat about Plaid for that to become a reality. And Plaid will hopefully showcase why that car will become a reality. There's a question around Model Y. We'll cover that off at the end if you don't mind. And also battery size of Plaid Plus and long range. Brilliant question. We do not know about that yet, but we're going to chat a little bit around Plaid and what makes Plaid Plus so incredibly future dependent, or the things that Tesla will be doing in the future are so dependent on what happens with Plaid. Now, what don't we know? And I think it's one that Ollie has just sent across to me, is CCS. Tesla have not announced what will be happening with CCS or their Type 2 interface. However, what they have announced is 250 kilowatt supercharging. And I don't see how they could be moving to this without moving to CCS, because those chargers are running on CCS. So they've not announced it. They've not said that it will be. But if you read between the lines, that is what they probably will be trying to do. We know that they have looked at CCS in other applications. We know that they tried to push CCS in the US as well. They look towards Type 2 becoming a US standard because they like it so much. And CCS is just a beefed up version of Type 2. And I think when we start getting into the realms of water-cooled cables, 250 kilowatts, adding an adapter to that can get a bit worrisome. And I wouldn't want to hazard that they're not going to change that charger. I think CCS is the way to go. We see that in everything we do with Powerloop as well. We know that CCS is coming. and going to take over from CHAdeMO, but there are still some things that some other devices do quite well, like CHAdeMO doing vehicle to grid. So I think we'll see Tesla make that move, but they might not make the move across the whole company. What they might do is stick with their Chinese specific ones in China, stick with their US specific ones in the US, and then bring CCS to Europe. And they don't want to shout about that on a world stage, because it might mean that they're not able to do 250 kilowatt charging at an Electrify America, for example. Electrify America are the Ionity in America or the Fastned in America. And I don't think they'd want to announce CCS to a world stage and then everybody start going, oh, that's amazing, we'll go to Electrify America, we'll go to here, or we'll go to here, and feeling that that would be okay. Whereas in Europe, we know that that's European legislation, and we'll see a bit of a difference there. Hopefully, that answers the question that we've got there. Now, all of this is sort of the new stuff. All of this is what's going on. But what we did have, I presented this to staff. And when we did, we presented the video from Mel Brooks' film Spaceballs. Now, if you've not seen it, I will go in and just explain something in a second. But I realized that, Ollie, a question has come in that says, what is CCS? That's a brilliant, brilliant question, actually. It's a combined charging solution. And it's the DC version of Type 2. Now, for those of you that are on the call that are already Tesla owners, you will be using Type 2 at superchargers. Now, Type 2 is this connection here. It looks like that. And CCS is a DC version of this. Now, what does DC stand for? It stands for direct current. When you are charging at your house, everything in your house, except your laptop, uses alternating current. It uses AC to be used. When you charge a phone or your laptop, you convert that energy to DC. And that happens in this little unit here. And that DC power then feeds the batteries. When we're driving long distance, when we're trying to get somewhere, I've taken 4 EVs to the Arctic Circle, I've taken 10 across the desert in the Middle East. When we were doing that, we wanted to charge nice and fast. We didn't want to charge at 20 or 30 miles an hour like this charger, which is perfect at your home. But what we wanted to do was to be able to stop for 20 minutes and then get on the road again, which is what those superchargers allow you to do. At 250 kilowatt supercharging, you're probably close to 120 miles in 10, 15 minutes, maybe a little bit more, actually. You're probably closer to, 100 miles, maybe in 6 minutes. How that works is that they add 2 extra prongs to the bottom here, and they push DC that's already been converted, because the car needs to be thermally efficient. It needs to not heat up. It needs to do all of this. Whereas at one of these big chargers at motorway service stations, they can put a big box that will do all the cooling, a substation essentially, a little bit further away, that allows this to all happen. What they then need is, as that charging rate goes up and up and up, they want a more and more stable connection. The European Union, European car manufacturers have decided that their stable connection is CCS. Does that answer the question? Hopefully, if that is, Ollie, can you just see if somebody can pop a thumbs up or something in the chat? I don't want to confuse too many people, but I want it to be clear as mud at the same time as I don't want people to be too concerned about what's going on there. Now, when I did this training to our staff, we spoke a little bit about what used to be. Now, when I was at Tesla, we released P85D, and we called that insane. That meant that the acceleration was insane. There was actually a switch on the car when you got in that you switched from sport to insane. What you then moved to was, with some development of some contactors, a slightly bigger battery, those contactors, or power switches as they then became termed, they changed the metal inside them, which allowed them to run a little bit hotter, which meant they could carry more amps. And that meant the car could go even faster. And when that car could go even faster, what they termed it was ludicrous speed. Now, for a lot of people, some people in Tesla as well thought that that just meant, oh, well, insane was insane, ludicrous is ludicrous. It's actually because Elon Musk is a huge fan of the Mel Brooks film Spaceballs, in which the Darth Vader character, the Darth Vader joke, is trying to chase down the good guys. And when they try to chase down the good guys, they need to go faster than light speed, which is ludicrous speed. So they pull into ludicrous speed, and by accident, they go beyond ludicrous speed and they go to Plaid. Because in Star Wars, when they go nice and fast, the planets or the stars look like lines across their canopy, whereas we're going so fast now that they've gone to Plaid. And that is why Tesla have called the next level of performance Plaid. But how are they getting there? Because as I spoke about with P85D to P90D and then to P100D, they moved to having a different metal within the power switches of the battery. But what are they actually going to do to make this car more powerful or draw more power and still get an incredible range? If I remember off the top of my head, the new long range will get 412 miles. The new Plaid will get 389 miles or 398, one of those two. But the new Plaid Plus will do 520 plus miles on a single charge. And that's all down to the 4680 battery. Now, that's a new battery or a new cell for Tesla. Up until now, they've been using a co-developed cell with Panasonic that's in the bottom of all your Model S's, all your Model X's, all your Model 3s. But they've been moving to this cell for a wee while. There's a few different reasons that they're doing that. One, because of energy density, they can store more energy in there. They think they can get potentially 16% more range out of it, and they can get more power because they can access power that would normally be given up for range. What they've also done is they've released a lot of the rare earth materials that sit within the battery, and they're not using them. They've found some really clever ways of not having a wet process, coating things in silicon, and being very innovative with the way that they've done things. Not only is this to make the cars more powerful and more energy dense, but also to reduce the cost of building cars and also to reduce the cost on the planet. I think most of us that are on the webinar or they're on the YouTube call tonight are fairly bought into electric vehicles. But there's always that one person down the pub that will say, oh, but electric vehicles are amazing because they're emissions free when you're driving them. But see, when they're being built, they're so much worse for the environment. Tesla have just written you a ticket to tell that person to get lost. Because what they've done is they've had an 80% reduction in travel for all materials used. In a similar sense, they've moved to a 75% reduction in investment per gigawatt hour, meaning that they can make their factories much smaller as well per gigawatt hour that they're making of batteries. These batteries are also nearly infinitely recyclable, which is a huge new thing. And also they've got rid of cobalt. Cobalt has a bit of a checkered sort of life and could be considered somewhat of a material that has a bit of an awkward history. But when we come to actually look at your car, the cobalt will have had to be accounted for. But just to stop that argument, they're getting rid of cobalt. Cobalt was thought to give the product or the battery a little bit better thermal properties, but actually they weren't so bad at how that happens. It turns out that you don't need as much cobalt as you thought to look after that thermal efficiency. Tesla are known to let the battery get a little bit hotter than most, and we know that Porsche, VW, Audi, Mercedes, they like a battery with high cobalt because they like to control that thermal effect a little bit more. That's their choice. Where they're getting their cobalt from is sourced and known, so we don't worry too much about it. But it's still not the put down that Tesla have just saying, yeah, but we're not doing it anymore. So what they've done is they're creating this battery, which is significantly cheaper, but also they can fit more into the car. Now, I know you're looking at me going, but Charlie, hold on. The battery's bigger. So if the battery's bigger, how are they fitting? The cell is bigger. How are they fitting more into the car? Where I'd point you towards this slide here. So early on, and we see this in cars, very much in cars right now, you can see that the fuel part of a wing used to be a bag. It used to be a bag that would fill up with fuel that was protected from the outside world. And the wing was a separate thing. So you'd build the wing and then you would build your fuel tank to sit inside it. All cars that we have, you can go and buy spare fuel tanks from cars all across the world. You can jump onto eBay or onto Amazon and you can just order a VW Polo 37-litre fuel tank, for example. But what you can't do is go and buy a plain fuel tank. Because what's happened now is they've worked out that by using the wing as an exoskeleton and containing with a little bit of protection the fluid inside the wing, they can get more fluid into the wing. They can get more petroleum or more fossil fuel into the wing by using less space of that wing as well. And Tesla are going to do the exact same with these cells. Because they're bigger, they're able to stress them a little bit harder. So that means that they can use them to be built without bolstering extra structures into the unit there. And this is there was a question about the European small car. This is how they're going to be able to do that, because they're going to be able to build a smaller physical battery that's so much cheaper to build, yet it will still have a really compelling range. And I think that's where that £25,000 car, €25,000 car really starts to make sense, is that if they can make it smaller but make the range bigger by utilizing this technology here. Now what they do is they stack them a little bit closer, they allow them to pinch, they also make the rigidity of the car stiffer, which is where they're using it on Plaid. That Plaid Plus car is going to be fairly special, and we'll come on and chat about that in a couple of seconds. So with all this, they can see a huge reduction in cost, they can see a huge reduction in mass, and in fact, they think they can see these here. So they can see a 10% reduction in mass, and they think they can see a 14% increase in range opportunity. And they're using much less parts, very like the Model Y is using far less parts because they're casting part of that entire rear end. We know that we can see that that improves reliability. It makes the car more easy to get processed, and also the battery becomes stronger as a result. Now, what have they done to also make that car a little bit quicker? Because if we've got more power, we can probably do a little bit more with our motors. So at the front, they're going to stay with a single motor at the front, but the rear, rather than just having one motor at the rear, they're going to have two. And they're going to move to something called tri-motor setup. Tri-motor is like dual motor, but there's two motors on the rear. Now, if you are a follower of Formula E, you'll know that Audi have a dual motor setup on the rear, but it's not actually gearing, it's not actually in line, it's not actually on the axle, it's just two motors that spin up next to each other and push the car. What actually Tesla are doing here is they're putting a motor on each wheel. So each wheel will be independently driven at the rear. Now, why do we need to do that? At the front of the car, or when we're turning a corner, the outside wheels always need to go faster than the inside wheels. The faster we go, the bigger the delta. Now, with the front wheels, we harness this by turning the steering wheel. So we turn the steering wheel and both wheels can pull in the direction that they need to go. The rear, we need to start to turn through that corner by sending some wheels faster than the other. If you've ever been go-karting, you know that way that the go-kart bounces around corners like this? That is it trying to create that delta, that difference across the two axles. That's also why if you watch go-karting, they always sit at a slight angle. They're trying to create that difference in wheel speed by creating an angle in the car. And the wheels will be spinning at the same speed, but how much ground or how much distance they're traveling will be very different. Whereas with this setup, you're essentially doing the same thing, but you're doing it with motors rather than what we term an open diff or a limited slip diff. Now, an open diff and a limited slip diff are two very clever pieces of mechanical engineering, and they allow us to do some very clever things. They allow us to free up wheels on the outside or on the inside, and they allow us to push us through better through the corner. Now, what's the difference between an open diff and a limited slip? Well, an open diff just sends power to the wheel that needs it the most. So if you have one motor driving two wheels, an open diff will just send the power to whichever wheel needs it the most. Now, when I say needs it the most, not from our standpoint, not from the driver, but from which wheel is easier to turn. So if you imagine two wheels on grass and two wheels on tarmac with an open diff, if you slam the throttle on the floor, the wheels on the grass are going to spin much more than the wheels on the tarmac. What a limited slip diff does is it mechanically works out when there's a big difference between the left and the right wheel, it locks the diff and it locks the two axles together. What this means is that the inside wheel that's on the grass now has to spin at the same speed as the wheel on the tarmac. Because the wheel that's on the tarmac has more grip, the car gets pulled towards that situation. However, limited slip diffs provide us with a bit of an issue. They wear tires quicker, A. B, they're not customizable. Once you've set it at the limit that you want, unless you're going to get under the car with some spanners, you're at the point whereby it will take effect at a certain speed. What tri-motor will allow you to do is when you're driving normally, you won't need to have a limited slip diff. But when you get to the circuit and chuck your car into track mode, which hasn't been confirmed yet, but it's on Model 3, what will happen is that rear will start to take account for steering input and yaw rate and understanding grip. And then in moments that you need it, we'll start to put in a limited slip diff. Now, I have video on my YouTube, which I can share at the end of this if people are interested, of me driving for Tesla at Goodwood Festival of Speed. And actually, a lot of it is very understeery. The car is quite heavy. You need to get it into the corner and then light it up with the throttle. Whereas if you go and you check out Sebastian Vettel, that's not Sebastian Vettel, that's Sebastian Vettel, spelled Vittel. He was invited to drive a tri-motor car at Laguna Seca for launching Plaid in World Battery Day in September, October time. Now, what that car is able to do is rotate into the corner. So coming into the corner, the car will try and get into the corner a little bit better. That's because that limited slip diff at the rear is working overtime to get those wheels at the speed that they need to get into the corner. But it's not doing it with a mechanical system, meaning that in the slower corners, we can have it light up earlier. We can have it lock earlier so we get drive quicker. But in those big, long sweeping corners, we don't want that car to become twitchy. So what Tesla can then do is they can balance that difference across that axle. So in the slow corners, you can have a car that really nips in and really turns. But in the long open corners, you can have something that's nice and easy and open. Even the Formula One guys and the rallycross guys, especially if you go and watch, are always fighting with the difference between having an amazing car in the slow corners and having an amazing car in the quick corners. What this allows you to do is have both. An amazing car in the slow corners because it will rotate, kicking its rear around using a limited slip diff or a digital limited slip diff, let's call it that, using that tri-motor. And then in the fast stuff, it opens up both wheels and lets the car become so much more placid and so much less twitchy. Now, this is even harking to some of the best racing drivers in the world will set a car up to be super twitchy in qualifying and then struggle in the race. That's why you'll find if you watch Formula One, you have some drivers who can light it up on Saturday, then come Sunday, really struggle. That's because they're setting their car up to be basically undrivable. This allows you to basically have an absolute weapon of a track car to do a single lap. But then when you want to drive home, you can have a nice, lovely, relaxed setting to get you all the way home in relative peace and quiet. Now, I know I've talked this car up quite a bit. This is the Plaid Plus, and we've seen it testing at the Nürburgring. We know that Tesla will be going after Nürburgring time. They want to prove a point to Porsche. But we know that Porsche will probably bring their A game with something like a Taycan RS, which has been rumored as well. It'll be really exciting to see how those two go. Porsche have got that knowledge of creating a chassis that's really incredible, that can get round the ring really quickly. And they've created an electric car which can take a beating. But maybe what they're not so great at is creating the amount of power that the Tesla can do. And in that sense, we know that Elon and Tesla have been buying space at the ring last year and the year before and this year as well. Obviously, that keeps getting pushed back because of the big C word, but we know that that time will be coming, and we're going to set off a little bit of a, I'd like to think of electric vehicle war as we get closer and closer to chasing that ultimate ring time, which is what they've announced for Roadster. Now, all of this seems really cool and really exciting, and I would lie to say that I don't want to say that I'm really excited by this. I think this is a long time coming. This is a huge update that we've been waiting for. But there's a couple of things that I want to point out, especially with Plaid Plus. If you notice, this is the prototype Plaid Plus car, but the wheel arches are flared a little bit. That's because they are running a slightly wider tire and a slightly wider setup there. I don't want to be looking at people that are thinking about buying a Plaid Plus and using it for business or for commuting when you have small roads to go down. That Plaid Plus will probably be a little bit wider and therefore could be a little bit scarier if you have to take it across the Chelsea Bridge, for example. The other thing to it as well is to notice that this is still a prototype. So this is the car that went out at the ring. And you'll see it's not got all the other updates. There are still cars in the US, prototype versions of the new updates, sort of dechromed and things like that are going around doing the rounds. So we know that they'll become more and more and more as we go on. We know that they have at least 3 ring prototype cars. They have a red one, they have a blue one, which is this one, they have a black one, and then they have a Plaid tri-motor red car that lives near Laguna Seca. It's been spotted at Willow Springs and it's been spotted at Laguna Seca as well. I would actively encourage you to go and check out people like Mountain. If that excites you, if these lap times and how we do that get quicker, I'd actively encourage you to go check out people like Unplugged Performance and Mountain Pass Performance. And anything you want to speak about, please let me know. I'd love to get involved with doing some stuff on circuit in the future. Whether or not we're going to be able to do that anytime soon, we don't know. Now, there's one big question that before we move on to the questions that have been submitted that we do need to cover, and that is existing orders. Now, if you have an existing order, but it was scheduled before March, you should be okay. If it's scheduled after March, these cars are not coming till 2022. So we need to have a think about that. I don't want to go into specifics with people on YouTube. I totally get that that's not the right place, and I don't want to feel like you need to make snap decisions now. But what I would like you to do is to reach out to us with some questions about it. And it's super important for us to make sure that that is the case. Really want you to be aware that we do have options. We can speak to you. We can look at what we can do. So if you do have an existing order with us, or you've got an existing order and you weren't too sure how you were going to get that sorted when it arrived, please come let us know and we'll see what we can do. We know that there may be some stock that will be available because some people might cancel those cars that are coming in March. We know that there's a ship coming in March, but beyond that, we don't want to get your hopes up that you're going to see these cars this year. So please do get in touch. Please speak to us and we can go from there. And with that, I would like to open up to some questions. Now, I see there's been some coming in. Ollie has been keeping me abreast of everything that's going on. So I'm going to shut that down, and here I am, so you're able to say hello. Ollie, I can see there's some questions going on around that smaller car. So there's something around that smaller car will drop, and what do we think the chances are that Tesla's rumored 25k European car will drop while FSD is still affordable? I think that's a brilliant question. And I would caveat that by looking at what do we know about FSD in Europe? We know that Tesla come to the UK and come to Europe a lot to do FSD testing, full self-drive, for those of you that don't know what FSD stands for. And they develop a whole lot of stuff. It looks really cool. They put it in front of the people that need to see it and sign it off, and they get told, no, you can't do that here. And when that changes, I think we don't know. It's a huge up in the air situation between lawmakers, Tesla, and other car manufacturers. Now we're seeing that other car manufacturers are starting to get their head in the game. They are starting to be involved with electricity. Electricity does not come without autonomy, and autonomy does not come without subscription car services. And that's me saying my piece, not Octopus Electric Vehicles. Don't hold them to that. But you can't have one without the other, Do I think that that £25,000 car, €25,000 car will come in a time frame that full self-drive is still fairly cheap? Probably not, actually, because I think that car will become the robo-taxi for Europe. And if you don't know about robo-taxi, it's a plan for Tesla to move to full self-drive, and then you basically order a car and it comes to collect you, and it'll be super cheap compared to Uber or to Google or to whatever is out at that point, Lyft. But whether or not that will actually, whether or not it would be worthwhile Tesla putting that kind of feature on that small car, we don't know. Now, what do I mean by putting that feature? I mean allowing somebody to have access to that when all they're doing is driving it. I think what they'll do is they'll have it as an upgrade, but the hardware will be there, but it will be an upgrade that will be super expensive. But then that would probably drive people towards buying a Model 3. In the same way that you could probably point out, and I don't want to say anything anti-Tesla here, but is it potentially that Tesla are trying to force European orders of Model S and X to look at Model 3 as an option? Now, Model 3 doesn't come along without Model Y, and I know we had a question about Model Y as well. To my knowledge, so everything that I keep hearing about Model Y from my time at Tesla as well, and about how it's all working, it looks as if they're going to wait until Berlin Giga is up and running. So the Berlin Giga is a gigafactory that they're building in Germany. And I imagine they'll wait till that's up and running before they start shipping Model Ys to Europe or from Europe. Elon tweeted that Model Y will only be built or sold in the region that's being built. There may be a little bit of confusion around that because we are right-hand drive. And because we're right-hand drive, do we get cars from Asia that are built for Japan and for Australia, or do we get them built in the European factory? Again, coming from experience, what would I argue? I'd argue 100% that we'll see them built in Europe, because there are so many different regs for building a car in Europe. It would be bonkers for Tesla to ask the Asian factory to build something in Asia for Europe when they don't have any of that tooling process. However, I do also feel we'll probably be at the back of the queue when it comes to receiving that Model Y, probably behind Norway, behind Germany. Whether or not we're behind France or Spain, not so sure there. But I think we'll be behind the Scandinavian countries. We'll be behind Germany as well. And then they have to balance out whether or not, this isn't a political thing. Please don't think that I'm talking politically about this. What I mean is, do they sell more left-hand drive cars in Spain, France, Italy, and the rest of Europe compared to selling right-hand drive cars in the UK. And I think that's the bit that they need to work out. People like Ford have already got factories that can build the Mach-E here, and they already have a right and a left-hand drive tooling process. So that should be okay for them. Whereas for somebody like Tesla, who have to start that from the beginning, that could be a little bit trickier. So I don't want to hold off in the chance that you're going to get a Model Y in the next 3 months. But then this is Tesla we're talking about. Elon could tweet about it tomorrow, and all of a sudden, everything I've said doesn't make sense at all. Now, there's a little bit of chat as well. I've seen Ollie's let me know about a Tesla subscription service. There is something around what will happen with robo-taxi and being able to move to paying per month. There's also chat of them doing that for full self-drive. So you'll pay for it monthly, like Spotify. And when you stop paying, you won't have access to it anymore. We're not privy to any specific information. When I was at Tesla, they were only just bringing autopilot properly to the fore. So for me to wade in on that without understanding it totally would be wrong. But I don't want to say that it's not something that we have heard or haven't heard of. It is something that we do know they're thinking about, but whether or not they'll do something long term, we don't know. We've probably got time for 1 or 2 more questions. I see Ollie is typing as we go. So if there are any more pressing questions, Ollie, if we could get those answered, that would be amazing. If not, we'll let everybody go and have a wonderful evening. Waiting a couple of seconds to see as a message comes through. So just to put you all in the picture so that you don't hear me saying everything twice, I'm not watching the YouTube stream. So Ollie is doing that to make sure that we're all okay. So I see there's something that's come up here. Cybertruck, do we think they will be built UK compliant one, and will there be price cuts from T3 in Europe? Do you think these reductions will come to the UK, return to the £36,000 mark? Fantastic. Cybertruck, very close to my heart. I have a Cybertruck order. I would love it to come to the UK. Whether or not it will come in the version that it is, or whether it will get scaled down, or whether Tesla can sell a car that could drive through brick walls anyway, I don't know. And even in the States, maybe in Texas they'll allow it, but in other parts of the US, how do we get cars that are that strong? I don't know. So I think there will have to be a compliance system there. I think Tesla are always reevaluating how they build a car, or how they sell a car, and also how their margins look. So when I was at Apple, the way they work is that Apple build currency fluctuation into their price point. So if you go and buy a Mac today and you go and buy a Mac in 8 months' time or in 2 years' time, they should be about the same price because currency fluctuation is not hitting their margin. At Tesla, for a long time, Elon wanted to change the price almost every week to match currency fluctuation. So depending on what happens with the stock market, depending on what happens with Tesla and some other stuff, I can see that there could be some fluctuation in the cost of Model 3. But if Model 3 is going to get down to that price point again, are they then going to are they going to be able to afford to bring in a $25,000 car, a £25,000 car that isn't quite there? I think that will be the point for the UK. That probably car will be about 28, 29,000. And therefore, actually, it makes much more sense to have that Model 3 a little bit higher and then have that really standard car around 27, 28K. I see another question's come in there. Is there a gigafactory coming to the UK? So there may be a battery factory coming to the UK, a giga as in a gigawatt hour. But Elon has stated that Berlin was going to be the only one in Europe for the time being. So I don't see us having one tomorrow. In the future, let's never say never, but we do know that a couple of battery companies are evaluating using part of the UK to build their own gigafactory. Now, why is it termed a gigafactory? It's termed a gigafactory because it's producing gigawatt hours rather than kilowatt or megawatt hours. So the factory in Fremont that builds all the Model S's and Model X's, because they weren't creating gigawatts worth of battery, they were selling, or they were building thousands of cars. They called it the mega factory. So that's why in Fremont, you've got the mega factory. And then in Nevada and in China now, you have Gigafactory 1 and Gigafactory 3. Gigafactory 2 is actually building parts in the East Coast. So New York, they build like parts for superchargers, parts for cars, all that jazz. And finally, you've then got Giga 3 or 4. They've stopped calling them 3 or 4. But they've got Giga Berlin, and you also have Giga Texas that's being built as well. So you've got a lot of these gigafactories showing up. That's kind of becoming a bit of a Tesla term, gigafactory. But all it means is they're building gigawatt hours. So a gigafactory in the UK is very likely around the corner, but not a Tesla gigafactory. And I think that's really important to maybe point out. Thank you, everybody, for spending so much of your time with us tonight. It was really exciting. I'm super excited about Plaid Plus. I'm really excited if Octopus will let me get close to Brands Hatch, Knock Hill, or Silverstone with one. Fingers crossed. When one does come along, if we do get access to it, we will let you know. You will be able to come and see what's going on. And hopefully by then, we'll actually be able to sit next to each other and be able to do some driving. But until then, please keep a wee eye out. Jump onto our YouTube. As I said, hopefully we will get this 500e out online on Saturday. We just have a little bit of some complications with how we're going to film it because it's on my driveway and I can't carry my laptop everywhere with me. But when we come up with a solution, we will let you know. We will launch that probably on social media tomorrow. So please keep a wee eye out for that. We'd love to welcome you to it. If not, hit the subscribe button below. And that should just keep you up to date with when that does come. And anything else we release, you will be kept up to date with. But thank you ever so much for joining us. We look forward to seeing you at something with us in the future. Any questions or existing orders, drop us a wee email, hello@octopusev.com, or comment on Twitter or on LinkedIn. Send us a little message. We'll absolutely look to getting you all sorted. Thank you so much today, everybody. Go and enjoy your evening.